Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Reeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Hiya. Wow, such a range of emotions chatting with Kirstie today about her fabulous red dress project. And after you've listened, if you feel moved to support Kirstie and support the project and support the women that this project has empowered, then if you go onto her website, reddressembroidery.com, there is a donate button, and perhaps you would like to think about doing that. And also, if you would like to buy me a coffee to help support the podcast, to keep on going and chatting with fabulous people like Kirstie, then again, that would be wonderful and very, very gratefully received. So let's crack on and hear what Kirstie has to say about her amazing red dress. Hello and welcome to our lovely guest, Kirstie Macleod. Hi, Kirstie.
Hi, Sue.
Brilliant to speak to you today, Kirstie, and everybody. I think it was about September when Kirstie and I booked this. So we've been waiting ages, and she's been very, very busy. So she'll be telling us all about that. So, right, I have a quick bio here for Kirstie, and the main focus of our conversation is this fantastic project that Kirstie's been working on for 13 years or something now. It's a long time, isn't it, Kirstie?
It's about 14 actually, next
14,
month.
Yes. The years have clicked over, haven't they?
Yeah, they have.
Kirstie has worked as a textile artist for 17 years and on the red dress for the last 13. So what began as a sketch on the back of a napkin back in 2009 has grown into a global collaborative project involving hundreds of people all over the world. And I've got a little line of stats here, which I thought was fascinating. 13 years, 50 countries, 374 artisans and one dress. So what on earth am I talking about? The Red Dress Project was conceived by British artist Kirstie Macleod, and it provides an artistic platform for women around the world, many of whom are vulnerable and live in poverty. It helps them to tell their personal stories through embroidery. From 2009 to 2023, pieces of the red dress have travelled the globe, being continuously embroidered onto. Constructed out of 85 pieces of burgundy silk dupion. This is an amazing construction. The garment has been worked on by women, girls, men, boys, non-binary artists from 50 countries. All of the commissioned embroiderers have been paid for their work and receive a portion of ongoing exhibition fees, merchandise, and the opportunity to sell their work through the Red Dress Etsy shop. The rest of the embroidery was added by willing audience at various exhibitions and events. So as a little quick glimpse, that is what we're going to be talking about, Kirstie and her red dress project, and also about Kirstie the artist, because I don't want Kirstie to have been forgotten and kind of enveloped and overwhelmed by the dress project as well. Kirstie's links will be in, as usual, in her episode of Stitchery Stories, but you can also find information about the red dress on reddressembroidery.com, and the usual socials, etc. The links will be all there. So, Kirstie, welcome once again.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's been months since we actually got this booked in. So would you like to share with us what you've been working on, what's kept you busy, and what's got you really excited?
Yes, absolutely. So I think from September onwards, once I had the red dress back from the exhibition at the Fashion and Textile Museum in London, where it was for 5 months, I've just been on a kind of whirlwind adventure with the dress, really. We were first of all in Poland, connecting with refugees from Ukraine.
Wow.
So I met with a wonderful group of women, and we stitched together for 2 days on the dress, actually inside an exhibition called Traces of Sisterhood, which brought together lots of international female artists concerned with
lovely.
social justice and feminist movements and empowerment. So that was a fantastic 2 days. We then had a few days back here and then off to the Sinai desert to connect with 50 Bedouin artisans who worked on the dress in 2015. So the trip was about bringing the dress to show them, the completed dress or almost completed dress.
Ah, wow, yes. I was going to ask you about that. We'll come back to that, yeah.
So it was a big thank you. So we had a big party and a celebration to honor them and everything that they'd done, and they could see the dress and hear some of the stories. And then I traveled to Cairo with 6 of the embroiderers to put on a very, very snazzy event in the British Embassy in the ballroom there. So it was again about kind of celebrating and acknowledging the women, their work, the charity, the initiative that supports them called FanSina, and just generally celebrating Egyptian textiles and embroidery, which is, some of the best in the world, I would say. It's phenomenal. And then also I've been doing a lot of events in the UK, so bringing the dress to talk and present the project in various schools, support centres, events with refugees, and then there's I've just come back from Strasbourg, where I was presenting the dress for a week-long exhibition during a session there on equality and non-discrimination. So that was an incredible week, and in a very political sphere. So I'm not hugely practiced at that. I was really, really touched and encouraged by the response to the dress by all the delegates and politicians, and it just seemed so at home there amongst all the sessions that were being spoken of. So there was meetings on lots of on gender equality and domestic violence and conflict-based sexual violence, and very important themes, a lot of which are already very embedded in the dress. So it was fantastic. And the dress is now in the Preston Park Museum in Stockton-on-Tees. So I'm just back from installing that. So I've got a 5-week little hiatus now, just studio time and rest before the next trip begins. Yeah,
I know. Well, it was funny when we was exchanging emails. You were very specific. Said I'm busy until February. I thought that's quite a not a strange thing to say, but it's like, okay, wow. To be so busy that, trying to fit in a 40-minute conversation. But I don't think I've ever asked anybody that question and had this big long list of all these international events and all the things. So
and there's more. I haven't even said all of them. There was also Bosnia Herzegovina as well. And the thing is, I'm so immersed for that trip. There's often a lot of research and everything I need to do before, especially if I'm connecting with a charity or with vulnerable women. I really need to be able to hold that space. And then there's all the events I do whilst I'm there, and then when I'm back, it's all the kind of completing and closing up and all the sort of media and the social and the interviews and things. So it's been really busy.
Yes,
really busy.
Oh dear me! And I have to say, what a very emotional thing. So I'm feeling upset, just not upset, but kind of. I don't know how to describe it really. It's just such an immense thing that you've put together, that you've affected so many people's lives. I find that quite, well, you can tell I'm getting upset now, aren't I? Not upset, quite emotional. Wow, what a brilliant project.
I've cried many tears through the project, and actually a lot of audience that come and see the dress do cry, and also it's very triggering to see for some people. It brings up a lot of emotion and perhaps things that people have been through by seeing or resonating with a particular story, and I see that time and time again. But I think it's also just the immense weight and the power of bringing together that many voices. And a lot of them are very vulnerable. A lot of them are very traumatized. And ultimately, it speaks of connection and unity, and ultimately empowerment and strength. That's why the dress is just presented on a mannequin. That doesn't need anything else, because feminine voice is strong enough. It doesn't need anything else.
And that's the word, powerful. It's very powerful, isn't it? And when you were talking there about just being at that political event, with all those. Oh, let's face it, heavy subjects, very important, but wow, quite heavy.
Yes.
Must have been such, a powerful contrast between all those heavy discussions, and then there's this fabulous dress, which we need to get on and describe, don't we, actually?
Yes.
Before we spend hours talking about this thing that we haven't described verbally to anybody, because it's a podcast. But so that just struck me as an image, as being... how and we've talked about this on the podcast before with other guests, how embroidery can actually be a very powerful message bearer. And I think this is a classic example of that.
Definitely. Very, very powerful. And it's so accessible, and it's used in so many different ways and cultures. But I love that it's so accessible. You know, I've lived in so many different countries in my life, and it's a way of expression that I've always seen. It doesn't matter how much money you earn or what you look like or what you've had for breakfast that day. It's if you can hold needle and thread, then you can express in this way, and that's why I chose it as the medium for everyone to work with.
Yeah, it truly is a universal language.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Fabulous. Right. So, and now we've talked about the power and the impact. Let's talk about what we're actually talking about. So this dress. So Kirstie, would you like to describe the dress? And basically, you know, we had a bit of a teaser there about, you know, it was drawn an idea on the back of a napkin. And then I've also highlighted there, constructed out of 85 pieces of burgundy silk. So I like all the detail of how things work and things. So we might dive into the actual logistics of this thing as well. But would you like to start, Kirstie, and just explain about the dress, what it looks like? Just describe it to us, please.
Yeah,
there we are.
Yeah. So originally the dress was created as an art installation. That's my background. I'm a fine artist. I've been making lots of these very high impact installations. So the dress is almost, I think it's number 7 of those. So originally it was presented with me wearing the dress, embroidering onto it inside a Perspex cube, shut tightly inside a Perspex cube.
Oh, wow.
All the work I was doing was very feminist and often had this layer of a viewed layer of oppression or vulnerability, patriarchy. It's kind of woven into the piece. So originally the dress was actually much bigger. It was 25 meters of silk dupion, and over the years, with more and more embroidery being collected onto it, the presentation of the project became very uncomfortable to me. But the stories weren't my own. The stories were becoming, more and more kind of powerful and profound. And also my place as a white woman, a middle-class white woman, also became problematic when you're working with vulnerable communities, which was a tension I didn't want. I wanted to be very sensitive of. And also, probably the most important is the presentation inside a cube, where I was really kind of discussing or putting out there this idea of oppression. What I thought was more important was to highlight the strength and empowerment that women have.
Fabulous.
So just got rid of the cube, took myself out of the work, and the focus then could purely be on the artists' work and their stories, which is what needed to happen. So the dress is, as I said, silk dupion. It's a really beautiful, rich burgundy.
It's fabulous.
It's got like a kind of depth to it. There's some of the warp and weft is got black in it, so it's got a really rich depth. The bodice is, I wanted the whole dress to look obviously very feminine, but also to look very strong and empowered. So there's lots of military pattern cutting involved, especially in the bodice. The bodice is fully boned. It has long sleeves. I wanted the dress to have a kind of timeless quality. So it does kind of speak of historic clothing. Yeah. Especially in terms of having it boned and corseted, but I purposely made sure there were no frills or ruffles anywhere. No pink. I was very influenced by Alexander McQueen, so it's got a very kind of plunging neckline, and it's got this kind of stiff back collar. I can't remember the name of that collar, but it's I would say it's kind of quite a contemporary neckline, and then it's very, very curved. All the pattern lines in the bodice are really curved to accentuate the female body. The skirt has been taken to pieces 4 times over the last 4 years. Yeah, to accommodate the new work, because I never knew what was coming back, and often where I thought it would go, it clashed or it just didn't work. Several times I had to unpick it all and redo it. And the shape of the skirt has also evolved. And at some point I put some godets in. Yeah. Much fuller around the bottom. It's pleated around the waist, and it has the whole waistline about halfway through was dropped about 50 centimeters. So it's got this really lovely kind of flowing kind of downward flow. So the panels all kind of flow downwards. And then the back, it's got like loads of big pleats. So it's got this big fullness and then a slight train. about a third of the fabric was covered in a very, very fine machine layer of gold in Paris. That was the first thing that went onto it. It was a way to start the project off, just to give it some coverage.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was never intended to have to stay by itself. It was just providing a layer so people could work on top of it.
Mhm.
Lots of the artists have traced it and added their own motifs and beads and colors on top of it. Others have just done their own thing and used that as a base. So you'll see lots of that gold in and around the dress, and particularly around the outer trimming. The outer edge has got like a scalloped edging.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was from that place in Paris. So it looks, I think, very strong, very empowered. It kind of hints at lots of different countries and eras and ideas.
It does, yes. It's a very clever design in that respect. Yeah, well done on that.
Yeah. And yeah, I think it's what I really feel so happy about now is that the embroidery does, I feel, feels like it all flows together as one. There were a few years where it was looking very patchworky, but because the last 4 years since 2019, is that 4 years or is that
4, 4, yeah.
Most of the work has been done directly onto the skirt. So whereas for the majority of the project, I was sending out panels in the post. I never had the budget to travel to all the countries. I've been to them. So the last 4 years, the skirt was set in 2019, and then the work has been added directly onto the skirt itself. So it's meant that all the gaps between have kind of been filled.
It's all merging in now, isn't it?
In.
Yeah, fabulous. And I've just got to ask this one. How is the Dupion standing up to all this intense unpicking? And I mean, I've made wedding dresses out of Dupion and stuff in the past. It's just like, wow, how is it all standing together?
It is doing incredibly. I'm so proud of that Dupion, honestly. It has just done me so well, and it hardly ever creases. I mean, the amount of times it's being rolled up, rolled this way, traveling here, I've very, very rarely ever had any issues with creasing. Or if I do, it's just for 10 minutes where it just drops
out. It's the most beautiful fabric, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's so lovely to work on. It's got that kind of papery quality.
Yeah.
There have been a couple of marks that have appeared on it, but all I do is just get a microfiber cloth and wring it out, get it damp and then wring it out really, really, really strong. And then just give it a gentle wipe, and everything's just come out really, really well. Dust is the biggest issue. But again, just with a damp cloth, a very, very, finely damp cloth.
Just lifts it off. Yeah,
I'm thrilled with the fabric choice.
Oh wow, yeah. It's like we set off with these plans, and obviously this was going to be some kind of, as you say, it started off as your personal kind of statement about things, and then here we are now. It's been around, panels have been around, it's been unpicked. You never, I'm sure, thought about when you started where you are now with it. You wouldn't have started, would you?
No way. No, it has so far exceeded any possible hope or dream I had for this project. I can't believe so much of the time at the moment, quite what's happening around me and how far it's come. And it was a real struggle for, the first year was good because I got some funding, which to help start it. But then there was maybe 7 years of no one being interested in it, really.
Wow.
And, there were a few things that came in, but very little help. I got no funding. So I had
it's just ladies messing around with a bit of dressmaking and embroidery. Good grief.
Exactly. And I was a single mum then on benefits, so it was really hard to keep it going.
Well, crikey, how dare you even think about doing anything like this? Says me who's a single mum,
Little by little, it just began to interest people, and then with the more coverage on the dress as well, it became more interesting. And then actually it was 2020 when suddenly it rocketed off with the pandemic. Yes, so in 2020 I was actually in Mexico exhibiting the dress and had to suddenly cut the whole trip short. The museum exhibition was cancelled, which was really upsetting. But something about everything that we were going through globally, as the separation that we were all experiencing, the fear we were all experiencing. And I think something about the dress just seemed to really pique a lot of people's interest. And then it was written about by a blogger called Attire's Mind. I didn't know anything about it, just that my inbox was just being flooded.
One of those kind
Yeah,
of things. You think,
yeah.
why the hell am I getting all these messages and
Yes,
things? Yeah, wow.
exactly. And then, so someone in the end, someone saw it that I knew and tagged me in it on Facebook,
Yeah.
and yeah, it had gone viral. So, yeah, which was
Wow.
amazing. So that suddenly there was just this massive momentum of interest and press requests and exhibition requests, and then I managed to get some funding from the Arts Council, which was absolutely transformative for the project. Because finally, I could
Right.
get a website, I could commission a short film. Suddenly I was able to give it this access around the world. And then the rest is kind of just been total amazement and flow. I don't really reach out anymore. It's just all comes in.
Yes, exactly. You've been on I've got this kind of mental, sometimes it's a paper list, but I've got this like mental list of people, and as and you've been on my list for ages. I'd spotted it. I don't know, probably pandemic time, or you've been on my horizon for ages, and then it's like I'll get round to it. Right. I'm definitely going to speak to her.
Yeah.
So, that's really brilliant. So the logistics, I love logistics and organising things, and so what I like is how you've managed to get different groups of people. So the embroidery on there is also, it's like a palette of world embroidery, isn't it? There's styles from all over. And like you were saying, you'd been back to see these Bedouin ladies. So how did you find groups of people to send out the panels, and how did that happen? I'm quite fascinated by that.
Yeah, so it was a combination of things, really. First of all, I used to tutor at the Royal School of Needlework, and I was a practicing fine artist in London, so I had some really good networks, creative networks.
Right, yeah.
But actually, what was the most useful to me was all my family connections, having moved around so much. So every 3 or 4 years as a family, we moved to a different country. My father worked in energy, so beginning in oil, and then he moved to in biofuels. So we had this very multicultural upbringing, my sisters and I. We came back to boarding school and at some point too.
Yeah.
But it just meant that we had so many connections all over the world, and for me personally, that experience of growing up in that way really ignited in me this desire to just keep on reaching out and connecting and experiencing and understanding, which I think is a huge part of the dress. But yeah, so just lots and lots and lots of emails initially to lots of different people, and there wasn't a huge response or interest initially at all.
Really?
No, because it didn't look anything like it was now. And
I suppose people can't see it either. When it's like, I'll send you a panel out.
Yeah.
Oh, whoopee.
Yeah, it didn't have any momentum, and also I was really, these are skills that I really didn't have then.
Yes.
I was an artist. I didn't have all this logistical understanding of this, and there are lots of things now. I think, would I have done it differently? And there definitely would have been a few things, but I think in a way, what is I like that the dress is just really authentic and honest.
Yes, very
it wasn't
much so.
some big budget thing, and there were mistakes, and it isn't perfect, but life isn't. And I like
exactly.
Yeah, it's a kind of representation, I think, of what it is to be a woman, human, in these times.
Yeah, we're made up of pieces from all over, aren't we? And all sorts of things have impacted on our lives, and different things have happened. So yeah, brilliant. The Bedouins, for example, I was quite fascinated by that. So you've then been back and taken the dress to show them. So what response did you get from the people that had worked on it now they've seen the whole thing?
Oh yeah, it was amazing. We had this celebrative party at the founder for Salima's Gabali's house, and it has this huge kind of outdoor terrace, you can imagine, like in the desert.
Yeah, wow.
Shade. The dress was put up in the middle. So about 50 of the women came, some of them with their children as well, and it was a women-only event. The men were housed in the courtyard next door, so it's all very separate.
Yeah.
And I think they'd seen pictures of it. They'd worked on their piece 7 years before. It was a huge piece, 4 meters by 7 meters, which has been cut up and put around all around the dress.
Right.
So I think there was kind of bewilderment and overwhelm initially.
Yeah.
Trying to understand the surrealness of probably that experience for them. And in the middle of the desert, this was all happening. And then once I started explaining and pointing out different countries, that there was suddenly this real excitement that I saw in the women, and then of course they were picking out what they had done, and they're
Wow.
really really happy. It was wonderful, and then one of the women wore the dress with a burqa. So in Bedouin culture, women don't like to be photographed. So
Yes.
all the photographs you'll see of that trip on the website or in social media, you'll see all the women covered up. And actually, when Rabia, so Rahma, wore the dress, so everyone just stood behind me. So it looks like it's just this one woman, but in the desert. And actually, there's like 70 people behind me. But yeah, it was wonderful. It was really wonderful. So we did that. Rahma then wore it, and then some of the women then did this incredible dance around her, this tribal dance, and they all had these embroidered scarves over their heads. If you look on social media, it's all on there.
Wow.
With this really loud, incredible Bedouin music, and that was one of the high points of the whole 14 years for me, for
Wow.
sure.
Yeah.
It's just in the desert, just seeing the response to the dress, seeing this kind of active ceremony and kind of tribal happening, and all this is being imbued into the dress. Like every time I take it to a new community or a new place, or someone else touches it or someone works on it, their energy and that experience is imbued in the dress. That's why when you see it, so many people cry, because it's just so powerful. I have to be very boundaried and careful about where I keep the dress, because I have to make sure that I have boundaries and switch off time from it, because otherwise there was a time when I didn't, and I just used to see it all the time. It would be in my home, my studio at home, and I couldn't separate myself from the stories and from the work.
Right.
And it became a bit overwhelming for me. So, but no, now I feel like my boundaries are in place, and it is such a joy and a privilege when I am working with the dress. So
yeah. So I mean, that was something that I was thinking about when I was looking at, I've been looking at the images and following the story and all the rest of it. And I suppose I'm glad you mentioned about the boundaries, because one of the things I wanted to also speak to you about is Kirstie. Where's Kirstie in all of this? And I know you said you purposely took yourself out of the equation, for the reasons that you gave, which, is a brilliant basis for running this project. But I also was, in my mind, was going, well, what's Kirstie doing now? Does Kirstie feel as if she's been completely swamped by the dress and that she doesn't exist anymore? So that for me was quite an interesting, nosy question.
I'm very happy to answer it. So I haven't done any of my own work for 7 years. So
Right.
I don't feel at the moment that I'm a practicing artist at all. My mum said to me last year, she's like, you're not really an artist anymore. You're more like a kind of admin assistant.
You're an event organizer.
Yeah. And so, no, though I am absolutely desperately yearning to create again. And I can't wait to start. And it's looking like I'll be able to from June onwards, when the dress heads off to the US. But I feel like the importance of the dress and what it means to so many, and especially for the women that have been involved
Yes.
in the project, it's so much bigger than me, that it's never really been a question or me feeling like it's unfair or anything like that. It's like it's like a calling I feel that I've had, and I'm so honored to be doing it. That comes first. But there are definitely times I'm like, oh, I just love to have a day just making something, but and I will, and that will come. And actually, I think it's going to be so interesting to see what comes out when I do start working again. All my work's always been rooted in textiles. I did these very large installations. I've made films and animations, but I also used to do lots of painting and embroidery work. So I'm very interested to see, what's going to come out. But I feel like there is a lot to come out.
Just of the lived experience of all of this, because when I went and clicked through onto your artist website, my chin nearly hit the floor, because this dress it actually reminds me of like a riding, the lovely dressage riding habit kind of thing.
Right.
I mean, it's just a beautiful dress, and obviously covered in embroidery from all sorts of people in all sorts of different styles. And I had no idea what to expect. It was just totally. And then I went and looked at your art, and it was like, the art that you've done before you got involved with the dress.
Yes.
So it was so completely different. So I'd be really interesting now to, as you say, it's mating, quite stark in a lot of respects, and then because you have to think, well, the dress, it's not you, it's not your art, is it? It's everybody. It's a vehicle for everybody else to put their art onto it. So exactly. I found that contrast absolutely fascinating, Kirstie. So it's going to be really interesting to see, as you say, what comes out when you get back to being an artist and not an event organizer.
Yeah, exactly. What my work does share with the dress is use of color. So colors, that's my biggest sort of inspiration.
Yes, and that comes across with the the other work I've seen of yours. It's very impactful with its color use.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. But also it's the repetition. So I've done lots of pieces. I've done like threadless embroideries mounted onto light boxes. I've done just lots of simple drawings or paintings with just repetitive marks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very interested in this idea of kind of flow. So I've done lots of work on styling memorations. So like, you can see that there's a textile root, I think, and then there's this strong use of color.
Yeah.
But there's very little, what's the word? There's very little
embroidery.
Well, there's very little kind of adornment and vision and pattern and anything kind of decorative. That's the word. There's very little of anything decorative in it. It's much more minimal. It's very, very minimal, actually.
Yeah, and that for me was the contrast. Yeah, minimal. Thank you for that word, minimal. Compared to the rich embellishment of that really fabulous dress. Yes. I just found that wow. Yeah, it's really, we have loads to talk about. Now, in terms of when you were speaking with people about, would you like to add, something in here, telling your story, were people's stories, did they share those stories? Were they documented anywhere, or was something like very personal? Well, I'm creating this stitching and my story's still in my head. Was, what aspect was there of that documentation of story or not?
Yeah. So everyone was given the same brief, which is to create a piece that in some way articulated that person's identity and also to reference their culture in some way. But it could be very, very abstract or very, very literal. It's very up to the individual person. And also I asked them, the artists, to create, to document them working on it, because obviously I couldn't get to them. So take some pictures. And to write me some kind of description or biog or anything they wanted to have as a bit of text for their
to go with. That's what I was wondering about. Yeah.
So what came back is couldn't be more varied. So
yes.
Some people have you look at the embroidery and you can locate the country all like entirely, and you can see it's very traditional, and often they're using motifs that are particular to their family or their village or their town. So you can always locate that individual. So particularly in South America, I'm thinking the countries there that a lot of them came back like that. And then the other extreme, you've got people who have not only created these incredibly very, very moving pieces, powerful pieces describing or depicting life events, but then also I've had reams of writing alongside it, with very, very powerful descriptions, and sometimes very, very traumatic descriptions of war and abuse and trauma, so it's very much down to the artist. And I did struggle with that at one point. I was like, how can I bring all this together?
What are you going to do with it?
But in the end I've just been like, well, but this is the reality of it. I can't control it, and this is like the website. I think once it's all on the website, which it all is now, that's the kind of that's what holds it all together. Like that's the framework which everything exists in, and it is very much down to each artist and with the information that I've been given back. And that is just the reality of it. So sometimes the pictures come back and they're so dark, or just a really old phone picture or something. But actually that was the reality of the situation, but then there was this one charity where one of the people in the charity is an amazing photographer. So the women for that collaboration, got these like top notch, professional images. So it's just one of those things that I've had to kind of come to terms with. And actually, I think it just adds the authenticity.
Again, it's real life, and it's the lived experience of the people who've, so in some situations, if you had any old phone of any sort of description, to be able to send an image was amazing.
Exactly.
And just thinking about going back to that political event where you've just been. So, let's be blunt. The political realm, whether we like it or not, is inhabited by a lot more men than women.
Yes.
And so what impact does the dress, with its messages of this, lived experience of women around the world, what impact does that have on the mostly male political inhabitants of said conferences? What response do you get to that, Kirstie? I'm very intrigued about that.
The response was overwhelming and very powerful. And
does it get your message out in a really strong way?
Yeah, definitely. And there was a lovely conversation I had with someone, actually quite a few people along similar lines, but one particular, where we were discussing that almost the entire week of events and sessions were totally summarized by just looking at the dress for a few seconds. It was like hours and hours and hours of debate. And,
heavy debate.
Yeah. Wow. And actually you could also just look at the dress. But I would also say for that particular session, because so many of the debates were about women and about gender equality and violence against women, there was a huge quantity of women during that week.
Right.
Probably more women than men, I would say.
Good.
Lots of them had been writing papers that were being discussed, and because I guess mainly you get women working in those sectors.
Yes.
The empowerment of women. So there was a huge amount of some very, very empowered, capable, strong, very inspiring women that I had conversations with, who were doing such important work and the faces of change for women all around the world. There are people from all over the world, not just Europe there.
Yeah.
So, it was very inspiring.
Wow. Do you know, I have to say though, I'm not surprised you feel like you need a rest. God, just doing one of those things is exhausting in a lot of respects, isn't it? When you've packed all of these things in. But again, back to contrast, what I really like is, you just said that the dress is now installed in Preston Park Museum up in Yarm near Stockton-on-Tees. Now, I know that place, and it's a lovely park. It goes down to the river with it's like a fairly small house, isn't it? The actual kind of stately home. It's owned by the local authority, I think, as well. And what a contrast! But what a lovely place for it to be, though, as well. That this dress is getting about, and again, that's just another lovely contrast of a place for it to be.
Yeah, I feel like the kind of the dresses schedule is so full of contrasts. We can be we were in the desert one week, and then in the big fine art gallery in Warsaw the week before, and then we could be connecting with refugees in Somerset the week after, and then in a primary school, the next week, and then a museum or a gallery. The whole. Well, one of my biggest motivations and kind of desires is that this project is accessible on all levels. So we spend a lot of time making sure that there's a really diverse schedule for the dress, and that people are not that people can access it in various ways. So people who might not be able to access the museum or gallery, for instance, maybe they have learning difficulties or are visually impaired, and so I've gone and done talks at support centres and charities, to connect with those.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And also on the website now, I'm just beginning to have an access page. So there's going to be various things that people can download and so that they can enjoy the project, in a way that is accessible to them. Yeah. So it's a very diverse, and the contrast is incredible for me sometimes. But it feels really lovely to just have a bit of integration time now this next 5 weeks, after the last 5-6 months for sure.
Yeah. And is it finished? Is there any more embroidery going on it, or is that it now? It's full.
I tried to finish it 3 times last year. and I made that announcement on social media saying the dress is now finished. And then I met someone and just knew 100% that their voice needed to be on the dress without question. So, for instance, one was the incredible artist from Iran. That obviously her voice needed to go on.
Wow, yes.
She's going to remain anonymous within the project for obvious reasons.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I met this beautiful non-binary couple, and I was like, well, clearly that they should have a voice on the dress. They're they represent on the dress too. So as far as I know, there are 2 more pieces being added in Poland in the next few weeks. Ahead of a big museum exhibition that's going to open there in 3 years' time. So the dress has to be finished by June because the dress heads off for about 2 years, heading off to the US. And that is when I'm going to begin to create the full-length documentary film and the coffee table book. So I need the dress to be finished before I can start those things. And I do feel that it is time to move on to the next chapter. There is very little space left on the dress, and I do want to keep the little areas of calm that do exist to help the rest of the dress be read. I don't want to just kind of ram it full of so much embroidery that you can't read it.
Can't see it.
So there are 2 very, very small pieces. I'm about to send out the fabric to Poland for them to be worked on. And as far as I know, that is the last 2. But who knows? Who knows what will happen?
You've said it before.
Yeah, exactly. And I trust in the dress. I trust in everything that comes in. I believe it's right, and I kind of trust in the flow of it. And I do. There's a lot of feeling that's involved in curating this work, and I listen to my body a lot. But I think being able to connect with refugees from Ukraine was really important, and to have the voice of the Iranian people on the dress, that was very important.
Absolutely, So it's just documenting so many things, isn't it, as well? It's just, wow.
It really is, yeah.
Right, so, crikey, here we go. I could, literally, I say this every week, I could be talking for hours about this. So normally, Kirstie, one of the questions I ask people is, have they got like a funny story of when something was a bit of a disaster, but actually it kind of worked out all right? I'm sure there's been lots of scope for funny stories and all sorts of things. Is there one kind of little incident that you might want to share with us to give us a glimpse of, what's happened over the X number of years you've been working on this, where you thought, oh God, this is going to be an absolute disaster, but then perhaps it turned out for the better?
So I can't think of anything that I thought was going to be a disaster, but there have been quite a few interesting things to do with logistics and the fabric. So the panel from Japan got stuck in customs for 3 months.
Oh
no! Then there was a panel that was created in Kenya, but the lady that was overseeing the commission with the Nairobi Embroiderers Guild moved to Sweden. She sent me the fabric, but she had backed it and sewed it onto like 3 or 4 layers of very rigid fabric.
Right.
So I couldn't, when it arrived, I knew straight away, I can't put this in the dress. It's going to completely alter the whole shape of the skirt. It doesn't fold.
Yeah, it's rigid.
Rigid. So I tacked it in and sent a picture to her and said, I'm really sorry, but this is not going to work. So we discussed possibilities. And in the end, she said she'd like to reapplique the pieces back onto the piece of fabric. So I had to send it all back to her, this time in Sweden. It was mistakenly sent to her neighbor, and she didn't find this out. I think it was like 3 months or something. She couldn't find this parcel, so we'd almost kind of given up. Then she finally got it, created it, sent it back, and then sadly the panel didn't actually fit. So I then had to reapplique little bits, and actually it looks great. So one of the little female figures had to just come off and then be putting it into the Kosovo panel. Yeah, but it actually works really well. So that was an interesting one. And then the panel from Vietnam was created by a lady called Tamay, who lives in a mountainous village called Taffin. And so the embroidery that they do traditionally there is created on a kind of loose weave organic fabric, like a kind of canvasy cotton. Yeah. They count the holes of the warp and weft, and they create the stitches through that like a grid system. Yeah. So it's very, it's particularly for that kind of fabric. So obviously with a silk dupion, it's a huge amount more dense and fine. You can barely see the holes between the warp and the weft. So she was very concerned as to how she was going to translate this traditional embroidery onto the dupion. So I sent her the fabric, and after, didn't really hear much for a while, and then didn't hear anything more, and then there was kind of, she wasn't sure how she was going to make it work, and then a few years went by, and I thought, I think she's just not going to do it. 7.5 years later, I received it back.
Wow.
And it was actually during the pandemic, during lockdown, she suddenly had time, like a lot of people did. And so she just immersed herself in it. And so she's just done it freestyle. It's still the same beautiful geometric grid type patterns, but she's just done it totally freestyle onto the silk, and it looks amazing.
She's imagined the grid, yeah.
Yeah, that was a wonderful moment, getting that piece back. It was very special.
Yeah, because one of the things that we quite often talk about, because hand embroidery is rife with this, is unfinished objects. What have you got lying around in the back of a cupboard that's been on the go for years? So that actually fits into the unfinished object bit. I can imagine you were so chuffed when that finally you got it back. Wow.
Yeah, I also really love how it's lived with her for 7 years. In this mountainous village in Vietnam. I find that quite exciting, in her house, while cooking and with her family.
Stuck in a bag in a corner. I must get round to getting that done. Yeah. Lovely. So human, isn't it? It's just like, that's what we're all like. That is just amazing. Wow. And so then, looking forward, Kirstie, I know you said you've got the sort of deadline in June where I want this finished now, because you've got follow-on projects from that. Yes. And you're obviously looking forward to, moving on and doing something else as well, and bringing a bit of Kirstie back into your work. Yeah. So is there any kind of specific things that you're thinking about aiming for, or are you just going to let things unfold?
For my own personal work?
Yes.
So I've begun doing tiny samples whenever I have a little bit of a moment, and I'm working with embroidery at the moment. It's with wool, different thicknesses of wool, and it's working onto fine art canvas. So it's what painters would usually work on. So I'm using colours always is my starting point, and I'm creating. So if you think of Mark Rothko's paintings, that's kind of a good starting point. So depicting emotion and feeling through colour, but very large expanses of colour. So that's kind of the direction I'm heading in. I've just been doing tiny samples, but I'm looking to be creating very, very large canvases, I think, which will be built up with different layers of paint and stitching and wool. And at the moment, I feel like very moved to kind of integrate and share particular moments within the Red Dress project. For instance, my trip to Bosnia and Herzegovina last year, I found incredibly powerful, but also very, very difficult, because it was an amazing exhibition working with survivors of conflict-based sexual violence. Yeah. Just being able to connect with these remarkable women and also witness them as they were co-creating this exhibition called Speaking Out. Yeah. And 30 years after the trauma of what happened to them happened, they are now finally having the opportunity to use their voice and to speak out about what happened.
Wow.
And it was witnessing them moving through creating this exhibition for those days I was there, but also learning about their stories and about their lives. And I came back a different person from that trip.
Yeah,
I really feel, I have so much to say about that one. But also it's like being in the desert with the Bedouin women. That was, another very powerful one. And, eating with them and hanging out with their families and just having these very, very strong experiences. And there were several more, Kosovo a few years before, Mexico, and also just particular commissions like the panel from Rwanda is just so moving. And I speak about it so much, and I'd love to do a piece of work just on my response to what they've shared. And I think it's not about me like even necessarily telling people this piece of work is about this experience.
You'll know in your head. You might not say yes.
Exactly. And certainly I don't think there would be any motifs or any, well, who knows? Who knows? It would be much more abstract. So I think that's probably where I'm heading, but who knows? Who knows?
Yeah.
It could go anywhere.
That's just absolutely fascinating. I've got a head of like 5,000 questions, but
Yeah.
here we go. We've been talking for 50 minutes, so my 5,000 questions will just have to sit in my head, I think.
Yeah.
Kirstie, I'm just absolutely blown away by the conversation we've had, the project, the power. The power of it all is absolutely unbelievable, really. It really is. So hats off to you for
Thank you.
getting this thing from the back of a napkin to what were those stats again? 13 years, 50 countries, 374 artisans, and one dress. I just can't think we can sum it up any more than that. Thank you so much for sharing your glimpse of an amazing project. And yeah, I'm also looking forward to seeing what you create moving forward as well. Thank you, Kirstie, so much for your time today. It's been fabulous.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you, Sue.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and information around this podcast. Please visit stitcherystories.com. Of course, you can listen to Stitchery Stories on plenty of podcast apps at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and plenty more besides. You can also ask your smart speaker to play Stitchery Stories podcast too. But wherever you listen, why not leave us a rating and a review to encourage other people to listen too? I very much appreciate you taking the time to do that for me. So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. Keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery Stories.